Last time we talked a lot about your story, where you grew up, how you grew up. We kind of ended up with your first trip to Austin and the counterculture experience that you'd experienced there and kind of what you lived through. And so what I'd like to focus on today is your time in Austin. You know, we kind of touched on Franklin's Mast, and, you know, I want to go through kind of the categorically the bands you were a part of. I know you were a part of a large list of groups, but there's a couple that I want to hit on, and we can just go from there.
Well, Franklin's Mast was where I literally, turned pro, because prior to that, like I told you, I'd auditioned and been drafted into a touring blues band, and that dissolved unceremoniously. And as a pivot, I'd call my mom to let her know where I was, because I was back east up in Ohio in the winter of November 1971. And she told me a friend of mine from high school, Jimmy Siraj, had been calling me rigorously at her phone number.
Oh, at the house.
Right. This was when the days of the ring,
yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no voicemail, none of that, right? So she was getting annoyed with these serial phone calls. It turns out that Jimmy had moved the first iteration of Franklin's Mast from Wichita Falls to Austin. And he and I had worked together, unofficially in Wichita Falls, jamming and this, that, and the other thing. And he knew that I had chops. And we had a lot of musical influence in common. And we just vibed, we had a great rapport, because we met in art class.
Yeah.
I may have mentioned he was a really talented graphic artist.
Mm-hmm.
He was also a thespian, so he was an actor, had a great sense of self-confidence on stage, And so subsequently when he said, well, man, he said, if you get to Austin, I'd love for you to come play with us. And I told him my predicament. He sent me some money for bus fare, because I was stranded in Canton, Ohio in the winter. And my only option would have been to try to tough it out in Canton as a, unknown musician. But it was such a hotbed of music. Ohio is a real hotbed of funk music in particular, right? But that's another sidebar. My point was I was going to explore my options since I was already there, because my attitude is glass is always half full. If my body's working, I'm working. And something's getting ready to happen, because my dad always told me, if you don't have nothing going, don't expect to see anything coming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I always had the hustle gene in high gear, right? So the opportunity presented itself. I got to Austin, December of 71. And it turns out that the band was essentially ensconced in a storage warehouse, in a little storage facility on East Riverside Drive. Had electricity, shelter, but no hot and cold running water, no bathrooms, no amenities.
Right.
Literally. It was like roughing it one step away from being on the street.
Man.
Right? But they did have electricity, which was essentially all we needed. So to fast track, we had nothing else in mind except rehearsing, and food was incidental, right?
Yeah. If
we were across the street we were literally across the street from a 7-Eleven. We were across the street from a filling station and a Dairy Queen, right? And we were rubbing 2 nickels together like nobody's business, just trying to get, enough sustenance to keep us vertical.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the focus was literally the music first. And I'm not exaggerating. We probably rehearsed anywhere from 12 to 16 hours on a daily basis, with breaks, incremental breaks in between. First of all, because it's all we ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
And second of all, it's all we really could do. Right? So Jimmy had gotten himself a job like as a waiter at a restaurant called the Magic Time Machine. And what tips he was accruing, he was sharing with us, because we were only a 3-piece. So it was just me and a bass player.
Okay.
And I looked so freaky, I couldn't even get a job. You know what I mean? Like, this is a fact. I was just too extreme in my appearance, you know.
Give me a visual. So you had,
Well, you know, I had a afro the size of Sly Stone's,
okay,
so to speak, at the time, you know, like
Yeah.
really, you know, beyond 6 inches of afro.
yeah, okay,
Fantastic vibe, you know. But of course, I was already taking cues from like glam rock influences, right?
Mhm.
So I had like blonde streaks and whatnot in my
I
hair.
got
And
you.
and this is way before the days of like how the kids are coloring their hair now
Mhm.
with like controlled substances. I was using like Ritz dye,
Oh man,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we were inventing all of these fetishes that you see today, kids kind of in common. See kids in elementary school with streaks in their hair.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Oh yeah,
No, but that wasn't happening in 1971, 72, right? So that it was just that, and of course I said my fixation on the superstars, my two biggest influences were Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone, who were extremely flamboyant.
Yep.
So, you know, yeah, I was a peacock,
Yeah.
so to speak, right? And it was like 24/7. It wasn't like just for gigs.
yeah. It wasn't a gig. That was you. You rolled out of bed.
Jeans and t-shirts were not in my wardrobe at all. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
was living the dream in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward another month, we've got a hot 45 minutes worth of material, you know, and the majority of it is original material on top of that, right? So, you know, we had some covers, which were like, you know, some Larry Williams, you know, like Larry Williams, some classic, what they call classic rock and roll from the, what I call the vintage period, Little Richard, you know, Chuck Berry, that sort of thing. And so we had our own repertoire of that mixture of like American classics with these originals that Jimmy had been writing, you know, which were really pretty high and tight, bombastic little tracks. So without us being overtly influenced by any particular band, right? The only thing I could say was we were looking at the zeitgeist, like what was happening in the world at that time. And so by 1972, you had three-piece bands like Grand Funk Railroad, which was massive. They were like essentially the biggest band in America before Kiss became a thing, right? A three-piece.
Gotcha.
Now, this is in the aftermath of like the first wave of the classic British rock bands, which Hendrix was like the leader of that pack, right? Because Hendrix came on the heels of Cream. Cream disintegrated just before Hendrix exploded.
Yeah.
You feel me? And so when Hendrix came through, it was like another seismic shift. Sonically, visually, the whole thing.
Culturally.
Was like just different, right? Because he was so unique. And then on his heels, you had Sly and the Family Stone from America, right? So here we go again. Now you got two Black artists at the vanguard of popular music. But also in the mixture was like Santana was like exploding at that time, right? I was in such a fertile period of progressive music. It seemed like literally every other week there was something new, hot on the scene that was just like
changing dynamics.
Just fascinating, you know? I'm not talking about like little shifts. I'm talking about big statements, right? So not to get too far afield, we wanted to be an arena style band. Like clubs were never our end all be all. We were young and so young that we didn't know what we didn't know. We just knew what we were in it for.
Yeah. Well, you had to go.
And we were in it for that, you know, jets, limousines, girls, and of course the money that theoretically would come with it.
Sure.
Which we would soon come to discover was a completely different.
That's the illusion, right?
Yeah.
But you wanted the lifestyle.
In Austin, there was a Battle of the Bands at a nightclub called the South Door, which was situated not far from our little warehouse.
Okay, over there on East Riverside?
East Riverside Drive. As a matter of fact, if you're familiar with Austin, where the venue Emo's is now, The south door would have been on the other side of the street.
Okay.
Where they have like
it's retail and apartments.
Well, there's a what's those chicken fingers?
Oh hell.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Across the street from Emo's.
Yeah.
Where the chicken place is now.
I got you.
Would have theoretically been where the south door was.
Okay.
Then.
All right.
It was a Sunday. I'll never forget that. And this club was packed. And it wasn't a huge club. It was maybe about the size of the Continental Club. But what was going on was kind of the crème de la crème of the Austin musicians had just congregated because, again, it's the 70s. These are the days where nobody's staying home watching television.
Yeah.
And most musicians didn't even have televisions to speak of. And it was a tribal community, right? So musicians were kind of on the grapevine.
I see.
And if anybody had anything going on, it didn't take long for that word to get around different communities and everybody would show up. So the way I recall it, I think there was a linchpin because the group Cracker Jack was scheduled to play like later that night or something like that. And at that time, this was, so in terms of pecking order, if you had Cracker Jack on the scene, then you had all these other contenders in circulation, gravitating in that ecosystem, so to speak. Now, unbeknownst to us, we just knew that it was an opportunity to get a gig, and we didn't have any lofty aspirations because at that point in time, we really didn't know like who's who, like the pecking order of who's who. But I did have the advantage of knowing the guys in Cracker Jack because I'd met them in Wichita Falls. So in retrospect, I think about it like it was just so serendipitous, right? And that's why I use the expression, I do believe in destiny. I do believe that we all have opportunities of so-called forks in the road, and it's just a matter of our attenuation to clarity to take a left or to take a right. You know what I mean?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because what are the chances, right?
I mean, look at what we're doing right here.
So we wound up getting our whatever allotment. I think everybody had like 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, because it was like get in there, do your stuff, and move out the way into the next situation. We're going to see what's going on, right? Yeah. And it's almost like it wasn't like American Idol or something where you got like a panel giving you a thumbs up, or thumbs down. They were just going to run these bands.
Keep the drinks flowing, keep the bar tab going.
And don't call us, we'll call you. So after our set, a couple of the guys from Cracker Jack came over to me going like, man, that was pretty hot, like that sort of thing, and just started chatting me up. Mm-hmm. And then one of them was the singer, Bruce Boland, and he said, no, well, let me introduce you to our agent. And it's Charlie Hatchett. And Charlie was like, yeah, man, I saw that was pretty happening. Where you guys from? And we said, Wichita Falls. He's like, oh shit,
Yeah.
All right. Well, would you guys be interested in doing a bunch of gigs with me? And it turns out that this guy was like the premier talent agent for Central Texas.
Wow. Okay.
So he had like he had wires on like all of the quote unquote top working bands. Mm-hmm. Because his clientele were dialed in not just to the nightclubs, but primarily the real money was coming from the sorority and fraternity gigs from all the universities in the state of Texas.
Interesting.
Which is how Cracker Jack made it up to Wichita Falls.
Okay.
Midwestern University. So that was the circuit that we started on.
All right.
So within essentially 6 weeks of that, we were playing 4 to 5 nights a week, every week. And let's fast forward by, 3 months down the road, we had started to meet girls, and girls were feeling sorry for us because we lived in a warehouse, and they were like, well, you can stay in this room, or you can stay with me, or the other thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
we all had our little angels, you know what I'm saying? And that's all I can really say about that. They just wanted to take care of us poor little street urchins. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we were musicians and because they thought that we were cute. You know what I mean? And it's simple as that.
Hey, man, you had it all. You had it going for you.
So, once we kind of fell into the fold, the rest, as they say, is history. So Franklin's Mast proceeded to really, make some noise in the so-called local Austin scene, but more so we were somewhat notorious because our image was so outre, as they say, right? Because I was really fascinated with the explosion of glam rock as it was being exposed from England to the United States. And then by 1973, you had this big controversy with the band out of New York called New York Dolls, right? Who were from the art scene, you know? Meaning, without getting too detailed, in New York had a different aesthetic and a different sensibility about its rock and roll scene as opposed to San Francisco or even Los Angeles. Because of Andy Warhol and the success of Andy Warhol's factory, and because he had become heavily involved with like Lou Reed's first band called The Velvet Underground with John Cale. They were like the dark alternative to like the Summer of Love bands like Grateful Dead or Jefferson Airplane or even Big Brother and the Holding Company, because those bands, that band was not rooted in like blues or R&B. Like their sensibilities were European, right? They had a very unique kind of abstract, approach to the music, to where they had a drummer that didn't use a bass drum. Her name was Mo. She played drums with an orchestral attitude.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
The way that timpani players would play, right? And of course, they had two prolific songwriters in Lou Reed and John Cale, who eventually splintered off and had successful careers independently.
Yep.
But their aesthetic was like street. So Velvet Underground was like the first band that started writing about like heroin, where the West Coast bands were talking about psychedelics.
Yeah. Yeah, they were writing about the
Velvet Underground were writing about speed. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Like the street scenes in New York, which were darker, grimier, more hardcore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And everything from, gender bending, transsexuality, homosexuality, these sorts of quote unquote taboo topics that were kind of elevated and actually kind of beyond the veil of most, rock fans or pop fans or whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying? They were looking at things through a completely different lens, right? Which was really intriguing. So to make a long story short, as that scene caught hold, this band sprang up called the New York Dolls, which basically kind of presented themselves as they were basically unisex was their presentation. They had this great stylistic sensibility of blending male and female clothing articles.
I see.
In a brand new sort of a fashion,
right?
Because they looked a certain way. And when I say the New York Dolls, when you see the picture of their debut album cover, it pretty much says everything you need to know about them, right? Because it's a photo by Bob Gruen, a famous rock photographer, the same guy that, if you ever seen the photograph of like John Lennon with the T-shirt that says New York City on it, but that's Bob Gruen that shot that photograph.
The name sounds familiar.
He's a very famous New York rock photographer.
Probably heard about him in documentaries and stuff.
You've seen dozens of his photographs.
Yeah, okay.
Through magazine articles, books, this, that, and the other thing, because he's a legendary cat.
Gotcha.
But Bob Gruen became completely enthralled with the New York Dolls because they were just so unique in their presentation. And they played this real hard, gritty rock and roll with kind of a little bit of an R&B underpinning, but they weren't slick musicians at all. They were like pre-punk rock. It's like,
a little looser.
Oh, real looser.
Okay.
Yeah. They were edgy as hell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course, their debut album was produced by Todd Rundgren, who was considered, a really elevated visionary producer. So this album was like a cult classic from day one. It probably didn't sell more than 5,000 copies nationally. But just like punk rock, the 5,000 people that bought that record became like big superstars.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Guns N' Roses were like huge fans of the New York Dolls. All the LA hair bands, Motley Crue, Poison, all of them got their look, their attitude, everything from New York Dolls.
Wow.
Right? So, I digress.
You should be charging me for these history lessons, by the way.
Bro, there is a price tag somewhere in your future.
I got you.
At a certain point, money won't matter much to you, and I'll just ask you to cash that check. But I'll need it before I ask you for that.
Amen.
You got that on record.
Oh, okay. It's in blood now.
Okay. So that's kind of what set us apart, because the majority of the Austin bands, I'm going to say the majority of the Austin bands tended to be a bit more conservative. When I say conservative, I mean they weren't really performance oriented, like in terms of like putting on some sort of hyperbolic kinetic show, right? They were more focused on playing their instruments well.
Yeah.
And performing consistently. But they weren't necessarily showmen. So Crackerjack was a band that had a showman, like their lead singer, Bruce Boland, was kind of in the vein of a Rod Stewart, or a Steve Marriott. You remember me talking to you about Humble Pie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't overemphasize the impact of Humble Pie.
All right, I'm going to read.
So just like you got caught blindsided by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
It's the same type of thing.
Anybody listening to this man put me on the roots of Fleetwood Mac. And did I not send you at and I forget the name of the song, but just every blues, and I don't even know if they were a trio or how many people were in the band at that point.
I think they were a 5-piece.
Okay. But it just sounded so familiar to everything that was coming out of England and just the blues scene that was exploding. So anyways, that's a sidebar, but yeah.
They Fleetwood Mac were precursors, They,
Humble Pie.
Yeah, Humble Pie. Can't overstate it.
All right. Okay. So.
But my point was Crackerjack had this vibe, right? Because Tommy and Unc had been to England with Johnny Winter. They'd, been all over Europe, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They lived in New York, so they, were friends with Jimi Hendrix and all this stuff. So they had been at the top of the food chain, seeing like the top echelon of modern rock entertainers up close and personal, right? So they knew their aesthetic was like really well cultivated. So when Crackerjack presented themselves, they looked like a band from England that was just dying to be signed. Right image, you know what I'm saying? Their clothes were cool and their sound was awesome, So I'll put it this way: if you like ZZ Top, you love Crackerjack.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying, like that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
But my point was, we were like we're a generation apart from Crackerjack. Like Tommy Shannon's 7 years older than me.
Okay,
you feel me?
Yeah.
So that when I'm kind of getting my feet wet at 20, all these guys are 26, 27.
Yeah.
Now, that's dog years.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially the musicians.
Yeah, especially in the scene.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my point being is that I'm hanging with these guys, just like you're talking to me, soaking up everything like fly on the wall.
Yeah.
That's me.
I see.
In 1972, 73, I'm hanging out with these cats that had done all of this big time show business, right? And I'm just literally on their coattails.
Yeah.
As cool as I can be about it, I'm just as shy of being a pest because I'm just so curious about everything. Because it's the whole thing, you have to put in the context, Stephen. Everything was mysterious. Right? There's no internet. There's no quick source material to figure out how to do this business, right? It's like I use the expression, trying to become a professional musician in the 70s was like climbing a plate glass window where you could see something on the other side, but you couldn't figure out the inflection point, right? Like how you gonna get from here to over there?
I see.
Right? Because
Yeah.
there's no instruction book.
Yeah.
No manual.
There's not a lot of people to.
No YouTubes. There's no American Idol. There's no shortcuts. There's no nothing. But figure out a way to get your ass behind an instrument. Figure out a way to develop a skill set to where it becomes an extension of your personality. Because it's not just about being a technician.
Mm-hmm.
To get any sort of traction, you have to be a performer.
Yeah.
And as you know, being a musician yourself, it's one thing from like learning the scale.
Oh, yeah.
To where, you breathe the scale.
Yeah. Right. And it becomes part of you because people can see that.
So what I'll say is during that period in time for Franklin's Mast, the competition was thick, meaning, it wasn't like fake it till you make it at that level, right?
Yeah.
In other words, Austin was a magnet for great musicians from all over the state of Texas and all over Louisiana. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you get into Southeast Texas, you're talking about Louisiana.
Oh yeah, my wife's from that area,
and I'm telling you, a lot of music culture.
There are strong ties
flowing through the veins of generational families. You dig what I'm trying to say? So Austin being situated in the center of the state with the University of Texas being kind of like the magnet university of the state.
Mm.
So many fraternity and sorority parties. So much work to be had.
Yeah.
And of course, then you go to San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go to Waco.
Mm-hmm.
You go Amarillo.
You ever make it up to College Station? I gotta ask.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Bro.
All right.
Whether I liked it or not.
Yeah.
Was not the point.
Yeah, that was
like a voluntary situation.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That was the work.
We're just following the money.
Yeah. Hell
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a whole nother adjunct to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But what I'm just trying to tell you was what would fly in Austin would raise eyebrows in East Texas or West Texas. And it put a target on our back for being these weirdos. You know what I mean? It was cool in Dallas or it was cool in Houston, but not so much San Angelo or not so much Midland, Odessa.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Definitely not Beeville or Kingsville.
Yeah.
Right. You dig what I'm trying to say?
I hear you.
And brother, we caught a lot of heat out there because there was this cultural chasm, right? First of all, I'll just say it plainly, like racism was still in high caliber. Racism was still prevalent throughout the general state of Texas. Overt racism. Like I told you, I only went to an integrated high school the year that I graduated between 1969 and 1970. Right? I mean, Civil Rights Act mandated integrating schools in 68.
Yeah.
So my point being is that, culture moves at a snail's pace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Texas culture is deep, first of all, right?
Yes.
And when you're talking about people that are literally coming from agricultural, generational wealth, right? They're looking at things through a certain lens. Now, they're kids, kids will be kids. And I tell you all the time, like nobody's born with a racial prejudice. Nobody's born with it. It has to be taught.
Yes, it's a learn.
It has to be indoctrinated, right? Because if you put babies of different ethnicities into whatever a playscape, that's all that's going down is play.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the analogy is that musicians tend to be the same way. So when I was talking to you about the 30s and 40s, when the big swing bands were starting to integrate behind the scenes,
right?
That didn't mean that the African-American musicians could go to where the white musicians could go to eat or sleep.
Right.
But the white musicians recognized the talent and the innovation of the black musicians, and they wanted to be exposed and capture that magic. You know what I'm saying? And so they were like, hell or high water, I want to hang with the brothers.
Yeah, I'm going to go out to Harlem and hang out.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or this, that, and the other thing. Well, in Texas, that thaw was a lot slower. And I can only say, for all intents and purposes, that country and Western music was like the dominant cultural music in Texas before the Beatles. So alongside Motown, the zeitgeist started to shift. And because of exposure to programs like the Ed Sullivan Show, where you see Black popular entertainers, popular white entertainers, popular British entertainers playing Black music, right? Gradually, little by little, incrementally, everything started to thaw. And I give total credit to the musicians as being a really heavy influence in cultural enlightenment with regard to that, right? But all I'm saying is that in real time and space, you show up, like I got arrested in San Angelo one time because I went into a pet store to buy fingernail polish because I used to like to paint my nails black.
Right.
But this is way before what I call the prefab glam things that you see kids doing today.
Right.
The only black fingernail polish you could get was for dogs, for poodles.
Interesting.
Pet groomers.
All right.
Right?
God.
And I only got the instinct to do that because I had noticed on the back of a Rolling Stones greatest hits album that their founder, Brian Jones, had one of his thumbnails painted red. Just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
No explanation.
Just, that's what it was.
I thought it was cool as hell. Because it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was an accent. Caught my attention. And what I'm trying to tell you is an insider trading secret, right? I literally got all of my information from scouring album covers with a microscope, with a magnifying glass.
That was your social media.
Well, they used to put liner notes in records, right?
Right, yeah.
And sometimes the producer would talk about the production of the record.
Right.
And all the little minutiae, like when you go to the movies and you see like the trailers at the end and everybody gets up to leave, except the Marvel movies, because now they wait for the Easter egg. But I'm just telling you, I was that kid that would literally like read the trailers. Like, who did this?
I see.
Who was the engineer? Who was the producer? Who was the executive producer? Who was the, you know what I'm saying? And I'm literally like tracking this stuff, right? And I started to correlate. Certain producers work with more than one artist.
Yeah.
So here's Bob Ezrin working with Alice Cooper. Here's Bob Ezrin working with Lou Reed. Who knew? You know what I mean? Here's Jack Douglas working with the New York Dolls. Here's Jack Douglas working with Aerosmith. You know what I mean?
You're just putting your puzzle pieces together.
It's totally that. It's literally like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
But I'm that geeky kid.
Well, and that was your passion, and that's what you wanted to do with your life. So,
bro,
I mean, shit.
My dad was a shade tree mechanic. He said, if you want to know how something works, take it apart.
It's a good quote. Good not just a good quote, good mentality.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, good approach to
and
life.
That's literally what I did was I, reverse engineered literally every album that I liked. I started looking at not just the performers, but who were the people working with the performers.
And not just the music, but how it all came together.
Nothing happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You dig what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a collaborative enterprise, which is another part of our conversation. Maybe it'll intersect down the line. But I'm talking about the New York Dolls being like a sea change in presentation. We probably would have put our nickels and dimes together and bit the bullet and just gone to New York on a cold call if we had one person that would have been waiting to receive us. You see what I'm saying? But we didn't. We had Charlie Hatchett, and we were with Hatchett Talent, and we were ride or die with, because, he's keeping us busy enough to stay fed. And it's not just being fed. It's like what we started to notice was after 6 months, we got better.
Reps.
And then after a year, we got better still. And then after 18 months, we're thinking like, man, we need to get into the studio, right? We need to capture this lightning in a bottle. Because audiences are responding to us. We had a strong female following. Because as I said before, just trying to put things in common terms, like Jimmy Siraj had energy like Angus Young from AC/DC. He's very confident. And then he was physically beautiful. He looked like Jimmy Page, right? Because he's Eurasian, he's half Asian, you know, big, beautiful, curly, flowing black shag haircut. Yeah. And he was only 5'3". He's little, like Prince.
Didn't matter. He acted 6'3" on stage.
But that's my point. The girls loved him because he was like cuddly.
Yeah.
You know?
Does he like that? Would he have liked it? I got you.
I may exaggerate. He might have been a little taller. He might have been 5'5".
Yeah, you know but still, point made. Okay.
Franklin's Mast went as far as we could go. I think we got as far as a demo tape. The thorn in our side was management. We could never really secure reliable, influential management. Austin did not have a strong, established national music infrastructure.
I got you.
Nothing like we see today.
Right, yeah.
No South by Southwest, no.
Yeah.
Austin wasn't on the map.
Probably not very many studios.
Austin just wasn't on the map like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I got you.
From a musical standpoint, it was a hotbed because, as I said, there was a lot of working musicians here, and the economy was so affordable, right? I tell people all the time, man, you could get, 2 bands in a duplex, right? Everybody, whatever, pitching in $25 a week
to be a fly on the wall.
You're living in a 2-story, 3-4 bedroom place in Clarksville.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
You know what I mean? You could literally just hang in there by the skin of your teeth by pooling money. And everybody was because of the quote unquote hippie aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
When you first started hearing about co-ops.
Yeah, it was very communal.
Yeah. Austin was rolling like that.
Yeah.
Especially because of the student economy. You know what I'm saying?
I got you.
So students had like so much access to cheap rent, and musicians just went in on the coattails of that.
Okay.
You dig what I mean?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So we usually rented a domicile as a band, and everybody kind of took a corner.
Yeah.
If it was a 2-bedroom situation, I'll take this bedroom, you take that bedroom, or you take it this week and I'll take it next week, or whatever.
Oh,
if you had girlfriends or whatever,
the old,
if the house is rocking,
don't come a knocking.
All of that, right? But we were all in for a penny, in for a pound, and we were very, very much about making sure that we all broke bread. You dig what I mean? It's like I'm not having a hamburger if this guy's got a cheese sandwich. You know what I mean? It's like we'll work it out.
Right.
But whatever we're getting, we're pretty much splitting it up and dividing it equitably. And we just got along that way. You dig what I mean? Because our gigs weren't lucrative. If we were playing, some sort of sorority party or whatever, we might get $300 for it. We might get sometimes $5. The closer we were to like the holidays, like New Year's or Christmas, the price would go up incrementally.
Yeah.
But until you got your own following, you really didn't have much leverage.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You dig what I mean? So it took us about a year before we actually had a following to where the club owner would book us in San Angelo or Waco or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And they knew probably at least 50 people are going to show up, if not 150. It just depends on the weather or what else we're competing with or whatever. You know what I'm saying? No social media,
Yeah, it's all
you're limited as to how you can promote, and you really didn't have a lot of influence outside of the city of Austin, because Austin was really the hotbed of the poster community. The whole culture of like gig posters started here, right? And it's literally because there were, like I told you, San Francisco and Austin were like sister cities with regard to the way that the culture was flowing.
Right.
And a lot of the artists, there was a lot of artists from Austin that were part of that San Francisco poster scene, and vice versa. They would, migrate back and forth. So by the time you got the Armadillo World headquarters, it started during the era of the Vulcan Gas Company. I'm going to say loosely 1968. By then, the local musicians, it was ad hoc that if you're playing a gig, you need a poster. And you'd be up and down the drag, right?
With your poster.
In the middle of the night on speed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Just staple guns. You know what I mean? Going to town.
All the way down.
Everywhere where you knew people were at.
Yeah.
Around all the record stores.
Yeah.
Around all the restaurants that were close to the record stores.
Yeah.
At the music stores.
Dorm room, common areas, all that.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Wherever you knew kids had eyeballs.
Yeah.
That's where you had to be.
There's a story of you playing with your next band, the Skyscrapers, at Armadillo World headquarters, and you opened for the Ramones. Thanks for listening. Know someone we should talk to? Give us a shout on Instagram at Austin Music People. Tell your friends, tell your family, and get out there and support Austin music.